All right, and for everyone who just joined us, I'm Matt Landers with GSBA. I will be monitoring the interview from my computer here. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on the chat function. And if you're on a desktop, you can just go below the video here. There's a little chat bubble, or type Alt-H, and that will bring it up. If you have a question you want to ask, but want it more private, you can send it to me and I'll pass it on to Bryan. And then when Bryan and Manny are done with the main interview, we will open it up to audience participation. So just kind of write on the chat or raise your hand in the video and we will make sure that your feed is unmuted so that you can participate as well. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. And Bryan, I am going to mute my microphone in a second and just turn it over to you. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Matt. Hello, Manny. My name is Bryan Adamson. I'm Public Affairs Co-Chair with Susan Fuller for GSBA, and I'm also a professor at Seattle University School of Law. And want to start out by saying thank you for being here tonight for the GSBA's final policy roundtable of 2019, actually the final roundtable of the decade, which is kind of odd to say. Huh? As a reminder to everybody listening in, we will we'll have everybody on mute right now, but we'll open up later for questions. As you heard Matt say, he's monitoring the chat room. So if you have any questions that you'd like to address, ask Manny, please put them in the chat space for you. And with that, I am excited to introduce Manny Santiago. And as many of you know, he is by now, he's the executive director of the Washington State LGBTQ Commission. And it was established this year, and you know that it was a top priority of the GSBA's for the 2019 legislative session. So we are really honored and proud of the fact that this commission exists and that Manny has been chosen to helm it. And so I want to start out by basically just opening it up to you, Manny, and ask you first to tell us a little bit about your background prior to becoming the executive director of the commission there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because my background is actually in faith work. So I was a minister for many years and then transitioned to be executive director of a religious nonprofit in Wisconsin. And then my husband wanted to come back to Washington because this is home for him. And I work with Rainbow Center in Tacoma, and that's where we live right now. And so that's my background, always in religious world work, and transitioned from there to nonprofit. And even within the church, I also did a lot of LGBTQ activism. I was the first openly gay Latino person to be ordained within my denomination. So, been doing this for a long time. And when I was in the ministry in Seattle, my church was involved with the marriage equality campaign. Mm-hmm. So I was one of the faith voices for the marriage equality campaign. And so I've been doing this work for a long time, even when I was doing, religious work professionally. I was still doing LGBTQ activism. So that's my background. The past 2.5 years, I served in the Rainbow Center, as I said, and that is, as part of that work, I was involved with the GSBA and other organizations, not only in their day-to-day work, but also in the establishing of the commission. So so that's a little bit of.
That's great. That brings up the question about, you're bringing in all of these experiences of your background, your experience, your knowledge, and your familiarity with the community to this job. What is your vision for this commission?
Well, I have 3 goals with the commission. So, let me tell you a little bit about what I envision in terms of the commission. I think that the commission is established by the legislature, so it has a very clear mandate and is, point by point what it is that we're supposed to do and what we cannot do. If it's not within that, we cannot do it. So that's important for people to understand that as a commission, we are a government agency, and if it's not explicitly exposed in the legislation that created the commission, we cannot do it. Now, with that said, I do hope that the commission becomes a voice of the LGBTQ community to advise the present governor and future governors on LGBTQ policy, as well as the legislature. So that's the vision for the commission, to be an advisory agency to the legislature and to the governor. Personally, there are three things that I want to do in this position and during the first few years of the commission, and one of them is education. So I want both the system, so the government itself, to understand, and the people who serve in the government to understand the community, to understand the laws that protect us as employees within the system of government. And I also want to educate the community on what are our rights as LGBTQ people, who is a protected class within the Washington State legislature and laws. So I want to educate the community on what our rights are. This is especially important because of the rolling back of our rights at the federal level. So I want people to understand that even if the White House rolls back our rights, Washingtonians still have rights as LGBTQ Washingtonians. We still are protected in this state, and regardless of what happens at the federal level, LGBTQ Washingtonians and Washington residents are protected. So education is very important, and it's at the forefront of what I want to do. The second thing that I want to do is to serve as a hub of information for the community. So one of the experiences that I had when I was at Ramos Center is that we would get calls from people all over the state asking not only for support, but also, do you know of an organization in my area? And then we had to do some research and things like that. So I hope that having commissioners from throughout the state and having connections throughout the state and having a centralized place where people can come and find information, that people feel comfortable sending us information about, there's this book club that meets in Yelm that, meets once a month and is the LGBTQ book club. So, because it's important that people know that there are organizations, there are groups that support their community, that support our community throughout the state. And I want the commission to serve as that hub of information. And it doesn't have to be a business, it doesn't have to be a 501c3. It can be a community group, because that's the only thing that exists, that might exist in a rural area, right? But for people to know that we can provide that information where you can connect with the resources that you need. We are not going to provide the direct services, but we want to make sure that people know where to find those direct services. So that's the second one. And the third one is to serve as a place where all those agencies, organizations, and groups can meet each other. So the commission meetings are going to be public. They must be public. And I hope that people participate so they get to know who are the people who support the LGBTQ community within their communities and their locations. So education, serve as a hub, and serve as a unifying force for all of the different groups within the state that are doing LGBTQ work. Those are the three things that I want to do in my first 2 or 3 years in the commission.
Excellent. And then acting in an advisory role to
that's integral to that's at the core of the legislation that formed the commission. So the three things that I mentioned are like my things that I want to add to that, right? But certainly to serve as an advisory as an advisor to both the governor and the legislation on things that protect our rights, that expand our rights, and that our community is supported through legislation, and not only direct legislation that affects LGBTQ issues solely, but also on any other legislation that might affect our community, like sex education or access to healthcare or things like that, that are not just particularly for the LGBTQ communities, also for other communities, but to make sure that we are present in those legislations. So.
Great. Yeah. In an earlier interview, you mentioned also one of the goals is to provide a sort of a snapshot of who the LGBT community is statewide. Would you care to elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yes. So that's what I'm calling the mini census. And certainly we cannot do something as thorough necessarily, but we do not know where our community is, right? There are some surveys that have been done by national organizations, organizations based in other states, organizations outside of Washington that have done surveys on the LGBTQ community throughout the United States. And obviously, you know, they tell us some numbers, but we don't necessarily have accurate information on where our community lives and what the needs are of those community members who live outside of the urban areas, right? Urban areas that have services for the community, because we don't have much information about Spokane, for instance. Right. So that is going to be very important. We're already working on how to gather that information, what resources we need, and I hope that by the end of next year we have a better snapshot of who our community is and where we are.
Right. And you're not going to be doing this work alone, of course. You're going to have 15 commissioners, but they haven't been appointed yet. Do you have a sense or a timetable on when you're going to be able to name those commissioners?
Oh, yeah, everybody asks me, right? So,
right.
So it's very important that the community understands that I am not in charge of appointing the commissioners, right? My role in that process is very limited. The commissioners are appointed by the governor. There's a team that works on identifying the commissioners, on vetting the candidates, and then making the appointments. My role is to not only encourage the community to participate in the process by applying, by submitting, by recommending people, and then the other part that I play on this is to give some recommendations to the team, to the governor's team, but it is out of my realm to actually appoint or directly tell the governor, you know, these are the people that I want in the commission. So there are people that I wish I could say, you know, I want you in the commission, but it is not my role. Right. So that's very important for people to understand and to clarify. There is a team that takes care of that. And the LGBTQ commission is one of hundreds of commissions. It's different in the sense that this commission is a cabinet level position and a cabinet level commission. So I belong to the governor's cabinet, and my role is a little bit different than other commissions, but there are hundreds of commissions that this team has to appoint people for and to. So it takes a little bit of time. Just like the community, I'm anxious to know who the commissioners are going to be. My understanding is that that the team is working on that between last week and this week. So I hope that before the end of the week of the year, that we have the names of the commissioners. I also know that we have legislators who are going to be appointed as advisors to the commission, and I do know that at least 2 of them have been confirmed. Okay. And I prefer not to announce them because it is not my role to do that.
I was going to ask you who they were.
Again, it's not my role to do that, but I'm happy that at least we have 2 of the legislators already identified. Right. And hopefully before the end of the year, we'll have the 15 commissioners that are going to be representative of the whole state. Yeah.
Okay. What you said a bit ago about encouraging members of the community to share their voices, share their opinions and thoughts about who should the commission be comprised of. Look at that, think about that in another way, and ask you, what's your vision, or what do you hope the level of participation how will be when the community, once you get the commission up and running? That is to say, how will you ensure that LGBTQ voices from around the state are a part of the work that you do?
Yeah.
Or the commission does?
Yeah, there are several ways. One of them is that once that the commissioners are appointed or public, I want to make sure, well, internally right now we are working on setting up our website to make sure that we have a place that that people can come and find information. And once that we have the commissioners, one of my goals is that we can have as much information about the commissioners as possible on that website so people can communicate directly with them, because these are community leaders that are throughout Washington. So maybe it's a little bit more accessible for the community to go to them so they can bring the issues to our attention at the commission, as a commission. The other thing is that we have already, I have an assistant, an executive assistant, and the two of us have been already working on possible locations once that the commissioners are appointed. So we can, instead of expecting people to come to us, we are going to be moving throughout the state to host the meetings of the commission at the different locations throughout the state to cover all of the state. So that's another way that we're going to be encouraging people to come to the meetings. The meetings always will contain a part of like a public forum to let the community bring some issues to our attention. And that's kind of the most direct interaction that we're going to have with the community. But in addition to that, I am going to be traveling on my own. My assistant is already going to be traveling as well. Actually, I am home right now, but I spent the whole day in Seattle today, meeting with different members of the community and leaders in the community and legislators. So my hope is that I can go to the communities as well. And the other thing that is important, very, very key in this communication, is that we are available. So I am available. My email, my phone number is there, available for people to reach out to us. That doesn't mean that we can reply to every single email immediately, but every single communication that we get is going to be attended. And everything is going to be treated as with the importance that it needs to be treated, right? So people can email us with their concerns. People can, once that we have the commissioners, they can email the commissioners. They can come to the meetings. We don't have a permanent location for the commission yet, but once that we have that office, you will have the information about where the commission is located. So we will have, we will have the commission's office available for people to come and visit as well. And very important to let organizations know what the concerns are, so the organizations can come to us and present the concerns of the community as well. So.
Yeah. So I heard, part of what I heard is that hopefully there's a primacy being put on geographic diversity of the commission members.
Oh, yes.
That can make it more, communities more readily accessible, and the voice is more readily accessible to commissioners and to yourself as executive director. Also you and Omar are engaged in traveling now, and you will continue to do that as your outreach. And then you're going to be relying a good deal on technology, emails and whatnot to continue to ensure that members of the community have a voice, or they have your ear in some
yes.
fashion. I hear you correctly?
Exactly. And you probably also heard my cat that is meowing.
Yes, I did. That's what it's cool. Is it time for dinner or something?
So she's just asking for a treat.
Okay, all right, yeah. I just want to remind people on the phone that if you do have questions, go ahead and type them in and get in the queue. And I just had a few more questions for Manny at this time. One of the pivotal actions that the commission can take up is increasing economic opportunities for the LGBTQ people and recognizing LGBT business enterprise certification and including us in state contracting. I mean, this is one of the issues that GSBA has been working on for some so for some time now. What kind of work do you see the commission doing to support that effort and support those initiatives of economic empowerment?
Well, there are two things that I'm looking at here. One is through legislation to make sure that any package of legislation that deals with economic development for communities that includes some opportunities for LGBTQ individuals. One of the things that I've been saying to some of the legislators is that if they are interested in supporting economic development for different communities, if they start at the bottom, with those communities that have been the most ignored by, by the system, then barriers for everybody else falls as well. So if you open economic development and economic opportunities for trans women and trans men, then everybody else is going to have economic opportunities, because those are the communities that have the most barriers to access services, to access support, to access investors and things like that, right? So, so that's one of the important things that I'm going to be doing, like paying attention to legislation that deals with economic development in general, making sure that that our community has the same opportunities as everybody else. So that's it from the legislative perspective. Internally, in terms of the system and government contracting, this is new, and this is actually, I haven't had the chance to talk with Luis and Matt, but I've already mentioned this to the director of the Women and Minority Business Commission, and we are going to have the need for certification and to recognize LGBTQ-owned businesses certification in the processes for government contracting. And we are meeting on Thursday to begin the conversations seriously about the need to move forward with this. So, so those are the two perspectives that we're taking. But I'm really excited that when I mentioned this to Lisa from the Women and Minority Business Commission, she didn't even know, right? And so it's very important that we have that conversation.
Yeah, excellent. And that sort of dovetails into my final question before we take a look at the questions from the people who are in on this conversation. In addition to the certification process, do you envision any other collaborative initiatives or efforts with the minority commissions, the Women's Commission, Disabilities Commission, Asian Pacific Islander commissions, Hispanic commissions? Do you see, what are the opportunities for collaboration you see in addition to the one you just mentioned?
Yes, I see a lot of opportunities for collaboration with my colleagues. I already have a great relationship with the Commission on Hispanic Affairs, the Women's Commission. We also have an excellent relationship. We actually shared space right now. The director and myself share office space. Our assistants are next to each other. And we are actually co-hosting an event on January 30th. An outreach event. It's co-hosted by the Women's Commission, the LGBTQ Commission, and the Judicial Gender and Justice Commission from the judicial branch of government. So January 30th, 5:30 at the Secretary of State's office in Olympia, and you're all welcome to come. Those events are not only to show the solidarity between the commissions to the community, but also to let the community know what it is that the commissions are doing. So if you are around Olympia, feel free to come by. But yes, there's a lot of collaboration that is already happening. I'm already meeting with many of the other directors individually to make sure that we collaborate. Last week, I had a meeting with the director of the Department of Veterans Affairs to talk about collaboration as well, because the LGBTQ veteran communities is quite large in Washington State, and we're working on making sure that they are protected and that they have support from both, from the department and from the commission. And certainly the ethnic commissions are going to be working in collaboration with us to make sure that that we take a holistic approach to every legislation that deals with any of our communities. That we all know, I'm Latino, my husband is Latino and indigenous. We know that that all of our identities coalesce and come together, and we cannot just look at one identity and forget the others when we're talking about legislation that advances our rights and our protections. So we're going to continue doing that. And certainly, I've had a great time meeting the other directors of the other commissions and some of the departments. So I look forward to collaborating with them in every single piece of legislation that we bring forward.
Well, thank you for that explanation and that information. Do we have any questions, Matt, yet?
Yes, we have a couple people with some questions. I'm going to turn it over to Dana Savage first, and then I will go to the person who is hanging out only on the phone, and so who doesn't have the chance to raise their hand. I'll just make sure that they have the chance to offer some input. So whoever is on the 1860 number, we will be coming to you after Dana asks her question. So go ahead, Dana.
Awesome. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So I have two questions. I don't know if you want, and they're not related to each other, but so I'm not sure if you want me to ask them both right now or wait for a second round. Which do you prefer?
Just go right ahead.
All right. So the first question to you, Manny, has to do with the exceptions to the rule under the ACA as it relates to trans healthcare. Just to give a little primer, right now, the only treatments that are covered are those that are medically necessary, which is the law in the state. However, there are certain procedures that, even though the standards of care where they derived these treatments from, say all of these certain treatments like facial feminization surgery, facial hair removal, gender conforming surgery for non-binary folks, things of that nature, are medically necessary. Insurance providers in our state, including state health insurance providers under the ACA, are still deeming a number of these procedures as cosmetic and only the major ones as medically necessary. So is there anything that the LGBTQ Commission can take, any kind of action or anything that can be done to address these issues?
Yes. In fact, I had a meeting with Carter Boer from Ingersoll. We talked about what is happening. They updated me on all the details about their communication with the commission and the authority, the healthcare authority, and we're working on how to best support the community's efforts to make sure that that those provisions are actually reviewed and revised, and that they're updated according to the needs of the trans community. So it's in the very early stages of the work on our part. Obviously, Ingersoll and other trans community advocates have been working on this for a couple of years already. I don't have any updates right now, but I've been following following what is happening not only with Ingersoll and their work in communicating with the healthcare authority, but also my part just monitoring what the healthcare authority is doing to answer those questions, and answer those concerns. The one thing that we know for sure is that there's a public notice right now that the rule is going to be revised. There's no date yet on when that is going to happen, but they already made public that they're going to be convening a period of comments on how to change the rule, and that came out late November.
Awesome. And then thank you so much. And then my second question has to do with the panic defense. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but last year
Quite.
at the House.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't need to preface everything around it. Is the LGBTQ Commission, is it going to be coordinating any on this, helping raise awareness, bring it to folks' attention, or what sort of action do you envision in your role as? I
hope so. Right now, there's no plans. I've said all the things that we're working on already, and I've been there for 4.5 weeks. But that is one of the issues that we're going to be looking at, the panic defense. And it's a shame, really, that Washington is one of the few states where that is still possible, where a defendant can still use, the gay panic defense as an argument. Is ridiculous. So it certainly is on the radar, on my radar. I want to work on that. Right now we don't have a time frame for that, but it's certainly on my radar, and I hope that we can tackle that as soon as we're ready to do it.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dana. I got word from Fred on the phone that he doesn't have any questions at the moment, so now we can open it up to anyone else. So anyone, you can either unmute your phone or send me a message there and I can unmute you if you have a question. But in the meantime, Manny, it was very exciting to hear that you are talking with OMWBE about the LGBT Business Enterprise Certification. We're very excited to hear about that, and Louise and I would love to chat with you more about what that means, since that was one of the first issues that we worked on that got us keyed into the need for a commission, because we've been told so many times, oh, we can't even discuss this issue without a commission. And then we said, okay, so what about a commission? And then they told us, well, we don't want to create any commissions. We've got too many of them. And then, well, you need data. We're like, okay, so we'll get the data. Well, you can't have data unless you have a commission. So it's this ridiculous circular logic. So we are thrilled that we now have that commission and that you are in place, and hopefully we can break that logjam and, like you said, get some data and get some real results for our community across the state.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of possibilities, because one of the issues was that the people that need to hear this and make sure that the wheel moves hadn't heard of it, right? And I'm making sure that they hear of it, right? And then once that I have that connection, I can come back to you all and say, okay, what is the next step and how can we move this forward, because it's needed. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, and now I've got a question from Gary Renville. So Gary, I have unmuted your phone, so would you like to ask your question?
Perfect, Matt. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for setting up this time for us today as well. So I remembered back, sitting in the GSBA office way back in the spring, and we were looking over the application process for commissioners, maybe not only for this commission, but for other commissions as well. And I think a lot of folks, talked about the problem that many of us saw in the application process itself, that we're really tailored to, identifying yourself as a male or a female. But that wasn't the only thing, right? That it seemed like there were lots of things on those 100 plus commission applications. They're all, right, I think maybe the same, that really leave out a large part of our LGBTQ plus population. So I'm just wondering if that kind of conversation has kind of remained on the burner, and if that's something that that the commission might be taking a look on early on as it looks to get more and more participation from our community.
Yes, it is one of two issues that was brought to my attention by the governor's office that they wanted to work on. And there are a few complications with processes, right? So one of the things is that the information collected through those applications are under the public records rules, which means that all that information can be requested by anyone, anywhere, and must be provided. So if a person, if we immediately change the processes in which we collect information and the forms and how we collect information at the state government level, anyone can request that information, and with a recent rule from the Supreme Court, including date of birth of the individuals, and legal names, all that sort of things. And one of the concerns that I brought up is safety and privacy for people who are in transition but have not come out necessarily, or for whom being outed, especially as a trans individual or as a non-binary individual, for whom being outed in that way might be dangerous. Not everybody lives in supportive communities, right? And most of the requests for public records that the Office of the Governor gets are from people who are not necessarily working with us, right? Not necessarily working with the same set of values as the current administration. So we have to be careful on how we process these, because in order for us to update that, those forms, we need to have protections that people will feel comfortable sharing that information. And at the same time, we do need to update beyond the binary of sex and gender, right? So we have to be careful on how we proceed with that, but it is the intention of the governor to proceed with making sure that more diverse representation, that we actually collect more data and more accurate data on the people who apply for the commissions. Before I was in this position, I thought that it was just a matter of updating and adding a couple of more options. And that's true, but it's also true that we need to make sure that when it happens, that people who are not out, and for whom being out could be dangerous, that they're protected. So there are some things that are happening in terms of legislation that will protect some information, some personal information for government employees and people who apply through government, to government employment and that sort of things. So once that is in place, then we can update all these forms in ways that that reflect the diversity of our community and reflect the diversity of the human race, right? But it's important for people to understand that once that you put that information there, it is public, and we want to make sure that the information that is public is not going to damage or put someone in danger. So those are some of the things that are happening. But yes, we are aware of the need to update these. We are aware of the need to collect a little bit more information, because right now, like for instance, for the commission, we want to make sure that the commission represents the LGBTQ community, but there's no way of identifying people who are LGBTQ. So how do we address those issues while at the same time protecting the privacy of the person who might be exposed to danger should that information go out? So that's the balance that we have to keep in mind, and hopefully we can find that place where we can collect good information and reflect the diversity of our community in those applications, while at the same time protecting them from any possible danger. Yeah, so it's going to take some time, and I wish I could tell you, like next year we're gonna start rolling new applications with new accurate, demographic data, but it's a little more complicated than what I originally thought.
Great, thank you, Manny. Are there any, I think we've got time for about one more question. Does anyone else on the call have something they would like to ask Manny before we wrap up for the evening? Let's see, I will do the risky and unmute everyone quickly. So if you are interested, feel free to speak up now, and I can mute everyone else around you. So one last chance.
Hi, Matt, this is Susan.
Hi, Susan, go ahead.
Hi, Manny, this is Susan Fuller. I'm co-chair with Bryan of the GSBA Public Policy wing. My question is, alas, Seattle-centric. To the extent that the Seattle has its own LGBTQ commission, do you see a role for the state commission to work with the Seattle commission jointly on projects or how to approach various and sundry issues?
I think that there are possibilities of collaboration. At the same time, we have to be very clear that the Seattle Commission is a citywide initiative, and they have their mandate, and the statewide commission has its mandate, and they might not necessarily align because the needs might be slightly different. So to the extent that the Washington State Commission can support local initiatives, we will do. But it really depends on what the Seattle, the city's commission wants to do and how they want to do it. The state commission is going to be there to support any local initiative, but we will not be dictating what it is that, in this case, Seattle needs or things like that. So we will support. There might be some chances for collaboration in particular projects. I don't know which ones yet, but the collaboration has to be very clear, and we will need to be very clear on what can and cannot be done, because the state government is not going to be dictating what the city government is going to be doing. So government relations is a little bit more complicated.
Oh yeah, no, I get that. No, and I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
And at the same time, I want to reiterate, the state commission is going to be there supporting any initiative that supports our community at the local level, at the town, city, county level. So
Great, thank you.
All right, Brian, would you like to close us out?
Yeah, Manny, I just want to say thank you again for being here and sharing your perspectives, dropping some knowledge for us. And wanted to leave it to you as one last thing. If there's anything you wanted to add, anything you wanted to let us know before we sign off.
Well, sure. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me here and for listening to me. I have crazy ideas that I haven't said yet. I'm just laying the foundation right now to come up with the crazy ideas later in support of our community. But I'm excited about this work. I'm excited to work with all of you. I'm excited to see the community continue to grow in Washington State. And I'm really excited that our governor supports the community, is committed to this work, and actually listens to us. And I look forward to many, many years of working together as a commission, as the GSBA, and to strengthen our community here in Washington.
Okay. Hey, well, thank you for that. And on that note, we'll say so long. Go get your cat the treats.
Yeah, she's mad.
Yeah, she's mad, I bet. She's big mad. I really appreciate you taking the time. We all do. And thank you. And you have a wonderful evening. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Feliz Navidad.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Night.